to being the original Jew of the Bible, like David was, that knows when to kill and when not to kill. My daughter Ronnie got married. The one who made the shidduch, he was one of the fellows from Duma. So at the wedding, there was a lot of what they call Hilltop Youth, because my son-in-law was in Hilltop Youth, friends of the guy who introduced them. He's the guy who was a suspect. So we had a lot of in the middle of the wedding, some Hilltop kids, they took like a sign, and it happened to be one of the babies that were burned in Duma. I don't cry for Duma. I don't cry for what happened.
هذاك اليوم أنا طلعت على التلفزيون شفت العرس أو الحق تبعهم هذا، وهم يحملوا صورة علي، صورة طفل 18 شهر، ويعملوا له بالسكين. بالنسبة لأحمد ممنوع بالنسبة لي أنا أعيط، ممنوع أبكي، كنت أطلع برا وأبكي. طب أنا لما شفت هذا المنظر صرت أبكي على علي وعلى أرهان وعلى سعد، إنه طلع هاي العالم مستوطنين عاملين عرس كمان، يعني بتفاخروا وبتباهوا انه ايش قتلنا طفل 18 شهر.
أنا تروح أسبح. أنا تروح أسبح. شفت هذا الشعلوم. تعبان. أتذكر الشعلوم.
لو كان هذا الطفل إسرائيلي كان جميع العائلة جميعها كان ايش لموه حطوها في السجن ومدى الحياة. بس هون عندهم بتعاملوا بميزانين مش بميزان واحد. بقول لك هذا فلسطيني وهذا إسرائيلي، في عندهم ايش؟ عندهم محكمتين، عندهم قضائين.
A Palestinian youth convicting of throwing stones.
And drug addicts.
And so she was advocating sort of a broader look at what this test should be. But there was a pretty sharp debate on that point.
Did you get a sense of what the justices were thinking? Because, like, no Supreme Court case is theoretical, right? They're all important, they're all practical, but this has the potential for such dire, tangible outcomes, you'd think, if domestic abusers are allowed to get their hands on a firearm, that they just keep around the house.
Yeah, I mean, when the Supreme Court took this case, it was hard to imagine them striking down this law and siding with domestic abusers. I mean, you can see the headlines now.
You don't have any doubt that your client's a dangerous person, do you?
There clearly seemed to be an agreement, at least among a majority of justices, that common sense requires a ban on guns for people who abuse their intimate partners.
Your Honor, I would want to know what dangerous person means. At the moment,
I mean someone who's shooting, at people. That's a good start.
That's fair.
But there was some skepticism among a number of the conservatives, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito in particular.
General, would you just briefly define what you mean by law-abiding and responsible?
Over the breadth of this law, the potential that requiring people under these orders to give up their guns could ensnare nonviolent people.
Situations in which the family court judge who has to act quickly and may not have any investigative resources faces a he said, she said situation, and the judge just says, well, I'm going to issue an order like this against both of the parties.
And thereby disarms someone who really doesn't, isn't that big of wouldn't be that big of a problem.
Like, when is a restraining order not a restraining order? When do they all, like, when are they different things? Yeah.
But the government fired back and even had Justices Amy Coney Barrett. The significance of this case is
Right, because I think you really touched on it well there, that even if they uphold this law, the 30-year-old law that says, yeah, if you got a restraining order, you can't buy a gun, the fact that there's now this new standard to meet about history and tradition means that they can almost signal in this forthcoming ruling, hey, here's what we don't think applies, right? Like, here's the lawyers that should bring their next case where we can expand gun rights. Really interesting. Devin Dwyer, great reporting. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
One last thing. Do you have a cat?
I do have 2 cats.
How do they feel about you?
I hope they like me.
This is a researcher named Brittany Florkowitz who primarily studies non-human animal psychology. And she feels the same way about her cats that I think most people do. Yes, they purr when I scratch them, but do they really care about me? About anything?
You know, baby cats have this stereotypical representation in, like, popular media of, like, you know, being not as expressive.
Well, recently, Florkowitz published a study, a couple years in the making, where she and a fellow researcher studied cats hanging out in groups and studied their facial expressions. Which is a big deal because while these types of studies have been done on dogs and chimps and lots of other mammals, cat communication has rarely been analyzed, probably because everyone just assumes they're plotting murder.
We found 276 morphologically distinct facial expressions.
How many of them were like, screw you, facial expressions?
So non-affiliative ones, there was about 102 of them, or about 37% of those 276. And then 126 of them, or about 46%, were associated with the more friendly interactions between cats.
You're saying a majority of the cat's expressions were friendly?
Yeah.
So over hundreds of hours of examining this group of cats, they examined expressions into 2 categories. Affiliated basically means they're feeling chill around other cats. Playful, inbound.
Often partially or fully, and they also push their whiskers forward.
Then there are the moments that aren't as social.
When there's non-affiliative interactions taking place, maybe there were another cat behind the phone taking the photo. I would say this is great, right? Because the ears are going forward, right?
Yeah. Also, I'm not making this up. Brittany Florkowitz is from Lyon College in Arkansas. Just perfect. Hey, by the way, the study was conducted at the Cat Cafe Lounge in Los Angeles, and Florkowitz told us they had these cats up for adoption, and you know they must be nice because these ones apparently were.
With so much at stake, so much
happened overnight. We are here at Fashion.
For 30 years, my brother's death.
Pretty good.
Give it to me. Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food. GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, afternoons.
To get to his target.
I'm Kana Whitworth with ABC News. This is the story of savage murders, a determined small-town police force, and a scholar of crime. This is The King Road Killings. The full series is out now. Listen to every episode wherever you get your podcasts.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news, ABC News Live. Breaking news, exclusives, live reporting across the globe. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. From America's
Reporting in Moscow, Idaho, I'm Kana Whitworth. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
A rare move on Capitol Hill to censure a congresswoman for her remarks on Israel, the reaction overnight, plus the new push for a pause in the fighting in Gaza. What a potential deal could mean for the hostages held by Hamas. And here at home, time for training. The Jewish Americans picking up guns for the first time, worried about their personal safety.
Safety concerns in the sky. Does a shortage of airline pilots mean there's less experience in the cockpit? The new report raising questions, our expert with the bottom line.
Drowning in debt, the stunning new figures on credit card debt, and who's suffering the most.
A new battle in the sneaker wars, why Nike claims New Balance and Skechers stole its technology.
And the animals behaving oddly, from this deer's wild leap to the bear who came back after stealing the Taco Bell delivery order.
Democrats are celebrating
Initiative that will enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution.
Surprisingly strong Democratic showings, some upset victories, and a unifying theme around abortion rights and the way that voters are reacting to it. The
Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade. Anti-abortion rights groups have lost in each election, including in red states, Kansas, Kentucky, and Montana.
How important is this issue to you?
Extremely important. It determines whether or not I'm going to continue living here.
In Virginia last night, Democrats were able to hold on to their majority in the state Senate and flip control of the House after emphasizing abortion access, while Republicans rallied around Governor Glenn Youngkin's push for a 15-week partial abortion ban.
Governor Glenn Youngkin has made it a personal mission to try to get overall Republican control of the state legislature to push his own.
We have always dreamed of to stop the fighting, away the division.
Lucky in Mississippi, where Brandon Presley, the second cousin of Elvis Presley, conceded to incumbent Governor Tate Reeves. But the Democrats' momentum nationwide surprising analysts. It comes despite a new poll showing President Biden trailing former President Trump by 4 points in a general election matchup. Even among voters younger than 35, Biden still trails Trump. Third Republican presidential debate is tonight in Miami. 5 candidates will be there, but not Donald Trump.
Ivanka Trump is expected to take the stand today at her father's fraud trial in New York, 2 days after the former president's contentious testimony. She's expected to face questions about her father's assets and financial statements as he faces punishment for inflating the value of his properties. Ivanka Trump is not a defendant, but prosecutors claim she remained involved with the Trump Organization even while working at the White House.
A man arrested on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol with a loaded assault rifle now
pause this week as new details emerge about a potential plan to secure the release of more hostages. In the meantime, a rare move on Capitol Hill.
Underway aimed at pausing the fighting in Gaza. Not confirming the report.
Survive it. And we'll get you home. And
news conference, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's of violence against my staff. In Southern California,
Me as an Israeli, so that's really uncomfortable, and that's why I kind of stepped into the next level of training.
As for that vote here in Washington, 22 Democrats joined Republicans to censure Congresswoman Tlaib for her anti-Israel comments. A censure is only a public reprimand. It does not require any other discipline. Andrew.
All right, Liz, thank you. In North Carolina, police say a man who shot 2 sheriff's deputies was out on bond after a string of other crimes, including murder. Officials say the deputies were trying to serve a warrant when the suspect opened fire. They say Sean Locklear then stole the deputy's car and ran one of them over. He was previously released on bond in a robbery case and was charged with murder last year, but was again released and removed his electronic monitor.
Plastic bracelet on your leg on pre-trial release for murder means nothing. It was cut off. That's the reason we had the warrants to come find him.
One of the deputies is in critical condition. The other is in serious condition.
The pilot shortage is reportedly creating new safety concerns in the airline industry. According to the Wall Street Journal, a hiring surge is putting more pilots at the controls of larger planes, which they may have less experience flying. Airlines in the U.S. have added nearly 10,000 pilots this year.
Training. Basically what we have to do in the 1940s, early yesterday, when smoke from nearby fires combined with fog to really reduce visibility. Last month, 7 people died in a series of super fog accidents on Interstate 55. Looking at the radar today, more snow in parts of the Rockies, and there's rain and snow showers around the Great Lakes, checking the high temperatures, more record heat across the south. Chili's in the northeast, 91 in South Texas. For safety, some surprising crash test results.
In Dnipro, Ukraine, reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail. From Kathmandu, Nepal.
Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live. ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
You know, that sounds pretty good.
Give it to you. Your money. Breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food. GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, Afternoons.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Lonely, manipulated, villainized.
I saw her frustration.
This book is an emotional experience. Every page there is a revelation. Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
She's in tears. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, no, things are not okay.
That woman is strong. She survived a lot. Britney Spears is a badass woman, and I hope she knows that about herself.
It's Brittany, the new Impact by Nightline, now streaming on Hulu.
Reporting from Monterey Park, California, I'm Robin Roberts. Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there. You're streaming ABC News live.
We're back with crash test concerns for some popular trucks. An industry safety group found backseat passengers in full-size pickups are not as safe as they should be. The Ram 1500, Ford F-150, Chevy Silverado 1500 all earned poor ratings. Testers say the safety technology in the front seat hasn't made it into the back yet.
Now to Florida and the delivery worker finding something really unexpected at a customer's door. A rattlesnake. An Amazon delivery driver is describing her weeks-long recovery from a rattlesnake bite.
Everybody keeps telling me that it's like a 1 in a million that something like that happens.
Monet Robinson says she was delivering packages in Palm City, Florida, when she felt a sting on her leg.
As usual, we scan the package, put it down, and then go to take the picture. I felt like a bee sting.
But it was not a bee. It was an eastern diamondback rattlesnake. The highly venomous snake was still at the front door when deputies arrived. It was coiled up by the Amazon package.
What just bit you? A snake? Let me get you on the phone with fire rescue. Don't hang up.
Robinson and a neighbor called 911, not realizing the seriousness of the bite until she got in the ambulance.
And I could hardly breathe because my airway was like closing. My throat was like swelling.
Robinson spent nearly 3 weeks in the hospital fighting for her life. Authorities credit her quick thinking, immediately calling for help when the snake bit her.
Just grateful. Wasting my time. That's what everybody said.
We are glad she's okay. Amazon says it's investigating the incident.
Americans are facing record high credit card debt, now topping $1 trillion. Credit card balances spiked by $48 billion between July and September, and more people are ours begin this Friday.
Coming up, the mother who is suing American Airlines, claiming the airline misplaced her kid.
Also ahead, bittersweet pandemonium at the National Zoo.
Whenever news breaks,
The crushing families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado. From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
reporting from Uvalde, Texas, ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine. Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story,
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
You know, that sounds pretty good.
Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food. GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, Afternoons.
For everything you need to know.
I love that.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here.
Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
A big auction in Europe, a 17-plus carat diamond known as the Blue Royal, just sold for nearly $44 million. It's the largest internally flawless vivid blue diamond ever auctioned.
A Florida woman is suing American Airlines, claiming it misplaced her kids as they traveled from Missouri to New York. Amber Vensil says her 10 and 12-year-old sons were flying with the unaccompanied minor program when their connecting flight was canceled. She claims they had to spend the night in a cold room that was like a jail cell.
I asked them if they had anything to eat or drink, and they were like, no, Mom. I have faith that during the transitions at the airports, they would be with a flight attendant since they had that service.
The airline is reviewing the lawsuit. It says safety and comfort are its top priorities.
Now to the pandemonium in Washington. It's a bittersweet goodbye at the National Zoo as some beloved animals prepare to head home. Here's ABC's Andrea Fujii.
This morning, fans of the beloved giant pandas at the National Zoo are saying final goodbyes as the animals prepare to head back to China as early as today.
We know they go to China for a higher purpose, to be a part of the breeding program.
The Chinese pandas, Mei Shang and Tian Tian, arrived at the National Zoo in 2000. They were only supposed to be on loan from China for 10 years, but the agreement was renewed 3 times. And in 2020, they had a baby boy. But efforts to renew the agreement, experts say it's a sign of worsening relations between the U.S. and China.
I am really sad because I know these animals as individuals, but when I think about what we're doing for a whole species, it makes the hurt a little bit less.
Pandas are no longer considered an endangered species, with the giant panda population now growing. Zoo workers say that's partly because of their work here.
He doesn't flinch when they put the needle in. He also gets voluntary blood pressure readings. The cuff goes right around his arm, inflates, deflates. He's also had abdominal ultrasounds, cardiac ultrasounds, and he's also had x-rays done on his chest.
The pandas will leave on a special FedEx flight called the Panda Express and will travel with 300 pounds of bamboo to munch on. Workers say the send-off will be emotional for both the people and the animals.
If he did not trust us and we didn't build that relationship with him, we would not be nearly as successful as we have been.
Only 4 pandas will remain in the U.S. Those are at the Atlanta Zoo, and their agreement with China expires next year. As for U.S.-Chinese relations, President Biden and China's president will meet at an economic summit in San Francisco next week. Rhiannon, Andrew.
All right, Andrea, thank you. Coming up, the new sexiest man alive.
Plus, one deer's incredible leap of faith.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it. Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now. This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon.
My brother's death was this mystery.
There's been some human remains found at the bottom of North Head.
Everything changed.
It's about finding justice for my brother.
Sometimes you just have to stir the pot.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television. From America's #1 news comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and customizable to your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
You know, that sounds pretty good.
Give it to me. Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food. GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, afternoons.
For everything you need to know. I love that.
wherever news breaks. It's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Streaming free on ABC News Live.
Reporting from the front lines of the war in Israel, I'm Ian Pannell. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Time to check the pulse. We begin with the new sexiest man alive.
People Magazine's choice was revealed on Jimmy Kimmel last night, and drum roll, it's Patrick Dempsey. Of course, that's McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy. Dempsey even joked with Jimmy about the new title, saying, quote, "Never give up on a dream. We say it's long overdue."
Age is like a fine wine.
Indeed. Next, there's a new battle in the sneaker wars. Nike is suing New Balance and Skechers.
It's claiming patent infringement. Nike claims the two companies are using its Flyknit technology, which fuses lightweight but durable strands of yarn.
Nike is seeking unspecified damages. It already previously sued Puma, Adidas, and Lululemon over that same technology.
All right, next, the brother who was really confused.
This is the best story you'll see all day. The toddler in California had the best reaction when he met his newborn sister. Take a look.
She doesn't have any arms.
Oh, parents everywhere know that is called a swaddle. That is where you fold them up with their arms in so they don't do that startle reflex and wake themselves up. So he had the most adorable response. Looks like she has no arms.
Very cute boom.
Yes. What next? This is cute too. A deer's leap of faith.
This deer in New Jersey went soaring over a car. You see it there landing in the back of that truck. That truck was for sale at the time. The owner had to knock down $1,000 off the price because the deer dented the truck, and it was right when the buyer was showing up. Talk about timing. Deer's okay, by the way.
He actually leapt over almost 2 cars. Finally, a 400-pound porch pirate. This black bear stole a Florida family's Taco Bell delivery order, casually walking up to the door and taking it. He then came back for the soda to wash it all down.
Top headlines next.
This is ABC News Live.
The crushing of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine,
Close to the front line.
from the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
Along I-5. Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it. Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show. Lonely, manipulated, villainized.
I saw her frustration.
This book is an emotional experience. Every page there is a revelation. Brittany describes having a secret abortion that not even her family knew about.
She's in tears. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said, no, things are not okay.
That woman is strong. She survived a lot. Britney Spears is a badass woman, and I hope she knows that about herself.
It's Brittany, the new Impact by Nightline, now streaming on Hulu.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
You know, that sounds pretty good.
Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food. GMA 3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us, afternoons.
For everything you need to know. I love that.
Checking more top stories, Democrats scored big wins at the polls yesterday as abortion access resonated with voters. In Ohio, voters approved a measure adding abortion rights to the state constitution. In Virginia, Democrats won control of both chambers of the legislature as the governor pushed for a 15-week abortion ban. And Kentucky's governor also defeated his Republican challenger.
In the presidential race, the biggest donor to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis may soon throw his support behind former President Trump. Businessman Robert Bigelow tells the Financial Times he has to look at who would be the strongest commander.
The Supreme Court appears likely to uphold a law that bans gun possession for people under domestic violence restraining orders. The justices yesterday heard arguments, and a majority appeared willing to keep the law in place. A decision is expected in June.
Today's weather, rain from New England to the upper Midwest, more record heat in the south, and now snow in part of the Rockies.
Finally, the youngest head coach in the NCAA is celebrating her big win.
She spoke to Danny New.
Let's knock it off. There was a time when maybe we expected a head coach to be a lot older than the players. Enter Aaron Matson, the youngest coach in Division I athletics, whom the University of North Carolina hired at 22 years old.
And the Carolina Tar Heels have completed the undefeated season.
Last November, in her senior season at the school, Aaron won her, get ready, 4th national championship in field hockey.
What's winning all the time like?
I would say addicting.
Set up for Matson, the big ball hit!
But this process actually began that summer when the 3-year captain found out that her coach was going to retire after the season. Maybe most seniors wouldn't have this thought, but Aaron was like, hey, I should apply.
Our athletic director said, okay, go win a national championship. And I said, all right. We did.
Who's helping? Who's joining?
Obviously, it took some convincing.
I'm young, but I'm mature, and I'm willing to ask those questions and learn and grow.
18. But hey, it's probably hard to turn down someone who has been described as the, quote, Michael Jordan of field hockey at his alma mater.
Top of the circle, big windup. Bounced in.
Well, guess what? This past weekend, that gamble paid off for the school.
26th ACC title for Carolina.
As Aaron became the first field hockey coach in ACC history to win the conference her first season. Maybe she's young, but some people just know how to win.
And now you're thinking, one game at a time, let's win the national. Let's win
Exactly.
Well, Andrew, Rihanna, the NCAA tournament for field hockey begins this Friday. North Carolina, the first overall seed.
We'll be rooting for all the teams.
That we will. That's what's making news in America this morning.
It's Wednesday, November 8th, and look out, Republicans, voters are still angry. We start here. With abortion on the ballot, Ohio voters light up the polls.
Issues like abortion and marijuana are something that actually get a decent amount of cross-party support.
This wasn't the only place where Democrats claimed victory. We'll walk you through results across the country. Troops were in Gaza. Now they're in Gaza City.
This is going to be some of the most brutal fighting that we have seen in an already brutal war.
What happens when a bombardment gives way to an urban street fight? And the Supreme Court considers expanded gun rights for those suspected of domestic violence.
I fight for my family today and for all those who deserve to live free from fear.
Even if this precedent stands, it raises doubts about a bunch of other ones. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. At this point, Ohio is basically a red state, right? Like, sorry, Democrats, but Donald Trump has won the last 2 presidential elections there. It's got a Republican governor. Its most recent Senate election went to the GOP. Republicans are, for all intents and purposes, the favored party there. And yet, parties don't determine elections. Voters do.
Young people are a force to be reckoned with, not just in Ohio, but nationwide.
Last night, despite a conservative state house, despite conservative lawmakers telling them otherwise, Ohio voters said loud and clearly they want abortion rights protected in their state constitution.
I think it's mission critical when we talk about equality.
And while plenty of Republicans won last night, we'll get to that. Let's get into it. We got Nathaniel Rakich with us, who covers elections at 538. Nathaniel, let's start with Ohio. What happened last night?
Yeah, well, what happened was that the liberal side, the pro-abortion rights side, and also, I should say, the pro-marijuana legalization side in a different ballot measure, won out.
Women are not going to have other people make up their mind, especially politicians.
It was certainly a good night for liberal policies in Ohio in terms of just putting them on the ballot.
Clearly, stumbling around on abortion has not served the Republican Party well.
Like you said, Ohio is a red state, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with Republicans on every issue. And in fact, issues like abortion and marijuana are something that actually get a decent amount of cross-party support.
I grew up in the 70s. You know, back then I've seen people put in prison. I think there's a lot of people that are being punished because of a drug that's no more dangerous than alcohol.
When these questions were put before voters in Ohio, they went with the liberal side.
So, and abortion, and like you said, marijuana, brings all these people to the polls in a state where Republicans win more often. Is that also the reason that, for instance...
Next 4 years together.
In Kentucky, Andy Beshear, as you mentioned, won re-election, and he did campaign somewhat on abortion, kind of attacking his Republican opponent for supporting a total ban with no exceptions. But also, Beshear was a popular governor. He led the state through several crises, including COVID-19, including some pretty bad natural disasters. And so I think basically that's an example of him having his own distinct brand as a moderate Democrat, separate from the National Party, separate from Joe Biden. Obviously, nobody's expecting Joe Biden to carry Kentucky in 2024. So I think that's how he was able to pull off his victory. Where I do think abortion played a bigger role is in Virginia, where it looks like Democrats have prevented Republicans from taking full control of state government. It looks like they have kept control of the state Senate, for example. And that was a place where Democrats really campaigned on the issue of abortion, but Republicans did as well.
And I think Virginians can support where we are to protect life at 15 weeks with full exceptions in the case of rape and incest and when a mother's life is at risk. And
they actually campaigned on the fact that they would pass a 15-week abortion ban if they did take full control. And apparently that wasn't a winning message, despite the fact that it obviously a 15-week ban isn't as extreme as a 6-week ban or a total ban. But certainly I think between Virginia and Ohio, nothing of last night's results did anything to discourage Democrats from thinking that abortion is a winning issue for them.
Well, and even in races where, like, you've got an expected winner, whether they're Republican or Democrat or whatever, the margin of victory is a pretty important thing in a year like this, right? Like, what are you guys seeing at 538?
Yeah, one thing that we look at is whether a candidate wins by kind of a larger margin than expected, and that didn't really happen. I think in general the results were in line with what you would expect based on the polls, based on the fundamentals. So, you know, for example, certainly in Kentucky, but also in Mississippi's governor's race, Democrats did much better than Joe Biden did in 2020 and probably will do in 2024, but that's because they had strong candidates like Andy Beshear, the incoming governor. In Rhode Island, there was also a special congressional election, and Democrats handily won that race, but that's because it was a blue district, and their margin there was basically in line with Biden's margin. So I just don't think there was anything too surprising in their results, so I don't think there's a reason for either party to go out and say, oh, we really overperformed expectations, and really anything should change kind of our assumptions going into the night.
Right, and when we talk about Joe Biden, like, normally you think people ride on the president's coattails. Not this president, right? Like, not the guy with a 39% approval rating. So it's really the issues and the candidates and, yes, the voters who are creating all these trends here. Nathaniel Rakich from our partners at 538. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Urban warfare. We learned that difference on the streets of Baghdad and Fallujah. Well, in recent days, Israeli troops began surrounding Gaza City. Remember, in the 25-mile-long stretch that is the Gaza Strip, Gaza City is like 3/4 of the way north. It's absolutely packed with people. And last night, those troops appeared to move in. ABC's foreign correspondent Matt Rivers is in Israel right now. Matt, I mean, how significant is this?
This is going to be some of the most brutal fighting that we have seen in an already brutal war. There's no doubt about it. I mean, in terms of, infamous urban street fights that we've seen over the past 2 decades, Fallujah, Mosul, I think you're going to add Gaza City to that list just because of the layout. It is one of the most densely packed places on Earth. You've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people packed into a very small area, and Hamas has been preparing for this for years. So what you saw in the Israel Defense Forces' initial thrust here is they're going in from some northern parts of Gaza and also from the southern part. The idea is to surround Gaza City. They've basically driven a wedge from the Israel-Gaza border on the western side going all the way towards the Mediterranean Sea. Their stated goal there is to basically split the Gaza Strip in two. They say that it makes it easier to do two things when you do that. One, they lessen Hamas control of the Gaza Strip, and two, they clearly delineate a southern area where they say civilians can go south and be in a safer area. But at the same time that they're driving that wedge all the way through the Strip, they're encircling Gaza City. So they say that they have now completed that, and now they are going to start moving in. And I think that is where you're going to see even more intense street by street, house by house fighting, not only above the ground, but remember, because Hamas has been here preparing for this for such a long time now, they have literally hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, well-fortified tunnels that go all around Gaza City. So that means that they're going to pop up, fight the IDF forces above ground, then they're going to go back down, go into the tunnels, pop up somewhere else. We've literally seen videos of Hamas fighters coming up from some of these tunnels, placing an explosive on an Israeli tank or an Israeli armored personnel carrier, then running back to the tunnel before it blows up. That is literally how fast and how quickly some of these fighters on the Hamas side can run around and attack these Israeli troops above. It is going to be a brutal, brutal series of engagements, and there's going to be a lot of people dying on both sides of this fight.
Well, and then there's the civilians, right? I mean, does this mean there's even more catastrophic damage to the civilian population? Do more civilians die? Or, I guess, have the Israeli bombs already caused so much damage that in some ways this actually becomes more targeted? How are civilians there feeling?
I mean, you could say the answer is yes to both of those questions. I mean, you've seen intense airstrikes, you've seen intense artillery strikes in that whole area that Israel says is targeting Hamas facilities, but at the same time, there's just no way to avoid civilian casualties when so many people are densely packed in there like they are. What Israel is saying, even now that they have encircled Gaza City, they say that they're still allowing for several hours per day for these humanitarian corridors, as they call them, to be used. They continue to call for civilians in Gaza City to move out. And we have seen hundreds of thousands of people displaced moving south, where the Israeli military says, okay, if you're a civilian in Gaza, you can go south and be safe. Well, we know that's not entirely true. I mean, our team was on the ground today filming the aftermath of what they said was an Israeli airstrike that hurt people down there. That was below the line where Israel says it is safe for civilians to go to. So people point to that and say, well, is it really safe to do that? And they would say no. Separately, what Israel says is that Hamas is actually preventing people from leaving. That's what Western officials have said as well, that they've seen evidence that Hamas is preventing civilians from leaving because they use civilians as human shields. It's probably a mixture of both of those things. Some people do not want to leave because they don't feel it's safe. They don't want to leave their homes. And Hamas is also preventing people from leaving. The end result of all of that, no question, is that as this goes forward, more civilians are going to die. It is just an indisputable fact.
So then, Matt, when we look at these troops now surrounding and going right into Gaza City and, hunkering down, does all this make a ceasefire or just a humanitarian pause, as the White House seems to be pushing for? Does that make that all less likely?
Yeah, so what we've heard from President Biden, from Secretary of State Antony Blinken when he was here over the past couple of days, they are clearly and consistently calling for humanitarian pauses.
Ultimately, we believe this can be a critical mechanism for protecting civilians while enabling Israel to achieve its objectives of defeating Hamas.
The White House has not gone as far to call for a ceasefire, but they are calling for humanitarian pauses to allow, for example, a chance to get some of these hostages out. What Israel has said is that it won't even consider a ceasefire, let alone a humanitarian pause, unless Hamas firmly commits to releasing some of these hostages. That's exactly what we heard on the record when our David Muir had an exclusive interview with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He laid out that line for us.
If Hamas agrees to release the hostages, then there would be a pause.
Well, there'd be a ceasefire for that purpose. And we're waiting for that to happen. It hasn't happened so far.
But all of this is just on the top of everyone's minds here in Israel. You can't walk down a street without seeing a poster or a flyer for someone who says, bring them home. And it's a picture of a hostage. I actually had a chance to talk to a father today who actually didn't know until last week that his daughter was a hostage.
That was extremely hard to all of a sudden switch your head around to thinking that she's absolutely dead, to absolutely in Gaza.
He thought and was told by authorities initially that his daughter, 8 years old, a little girl named Emily, was killed. Well, turns out, a couple weeks later, after grieving, mourning for a couple weeks, he actually was told by authorities, actually, we don't have evidence that your daughter was killed. There was no blood found at the house where she was having a sleepover, where she was taken from. We have not found her body. We therefore believe the most likely possibility is that she is in Gaza being held by Hamas. Think about what that does to a parent's mind. A few weeks ago, this father actually said, you know what, I was actually a little bit relieved because of the alternative of what she might be going through in Gaza.
She wasn't suffering, going through any trauma, not being terrorized.
As I spoke to him, he now says, my nightmare has started again, because now he's wondering where she is. What tunnel is she being held in? Is she being abused? Has she been hurt? Does she feel scared? The answer to those questions, at least some of them, is absolutely yes. And so that's just a reminder that as we talk about these hostages and as we talk about the stakes here, there are just such real lives and real families being affected by this, and it's just one heartbreaking story after the next.
And so many unknowns, again, when you talk about these tunnel networks that the Israeli forces right now are going to be probably destroying as well as sort of navigating. All right, Matt Rivers, there in Tel Aviv right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, just because most members of Congress weren't up for re-election yesterday doesn't mean it wasn't a busy day in Washington, D.C.
We refuse to let 9 unelected judges decide whether people trapped in abusive situations will live or die.
In fact, the Supreme Court heard one of its most anticipated cases of this term, a case about guns and domestic violence. ABC senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer was there for arguments. And Devin, when we talk about guns, it's often, because of a mass shooting that just happened, so many more Americans die just through violence that no one else sees. And I think guns account for like half of intimate partner deaths in this country. Is the argument here basically whether domestic abusers should be able to buy guns?
That's what this case was about, Brad. I mean, one of the most popular and widely accepted gun regulations on the books for the past 30 years has been a federal ban on people under domestic violence orders from being able to buy it against someone, which would prohibit them from contacting someone that they had aggressed against, which would prohibit them from buying a gun, among other things, that those records are fed into the National Criminal Background Check System. And, of course, when that person then would go to show up to attempt to purchase a gun, in theory, that record would be in the system and deny them that purchase. Thousands of restraining orders are issued by judges every year, and the FBI says that more than 77,000 attempted purchases have been denied to people under domestic violence restraining orders since 1998.
I'm here today just to honor so many lives that were taken. Every month, 70 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month.
But I've talked to a number of victims of domestic violence that involve firearms, survivors of that violence, and they feel so passionately about this case, about this issue.
So he threatened you, he threatened to kill you?
Yeah, if I didn't do what he said, he said I couldn't be with anybody else but him.
Lachey Crechan, for example, of Louisiana, told me her harrowing story from nearly 30 years ago now, where she was shot 5 times at close range by her then ex-boyfriend.
And I walked away, and that's when he shot me behind my head and in each hip, and I just immediately fell on the floor. And I fell right next to my daughter. And my great aunt, she said, I don't know, she was just like, oh my God, he killed himself, and she was at the door.
Still has all 5 bullets inside of her, and has found the grace to forgive her ex, love her 2 children, but just so believes today, Brad, that had she, when she went to the police before the shooting happened, been able to get a restraining order against her boyfriend, block him from buying the gun that he used to shoot her, she would have been spared an awful lot of pain and trauma that still haunts her to this day.
I fight for my family today and for all those who deserve to live free from fear. Thank you for being part of this fight with me. Let's go.
So this law is seen as sort of a cornerstone of protecting those women And yesterday at the Supreme Court, it faced an existential challenge. The case comes from Texas, where a drug dealer and person with a violent record, his name is Zaki Brahimi, is currently behind bars. He faces a whole host of challenges. The issue isn't really that he's at risk of getting out, but it's, can he be charged, can he be indicted for possessing a gun while under a domestic violence restraining order obtained by his girlfriend. And Rahimi came to the Supreme Court yesterday and, through his attorney, argued that he cannot face those charges because, in his view, the law violates the Second Amendment because it doesn't have any historical precedent.
It is like a historical precedent. It's like a 30-year-old law, right? How would that not be precedent enough?
Well, the arguments, Brad, are fascinating because the Supreme Court last year, in a landmark decision, set out a new test for how we decide when gun restrictions in this country pass muster under the Constitution. For years, this law was not challenged because the guiding test was basically a pros and cons test. Judges would look at a gun restriction and say, do the benefits outweigh the infringement of the right?